Everybody. As you can see, I am at least temporarily not living out of a motel and traveling around the state of Pennsylvania. I actually uh, made my way home. A couple of things. First of all, had great trip, multiple trips out to Western Pennsylvania. Folks up in Erie, fantastic. Mercer County, really good turnout, and Tony Shoup joined me there in presenting. We had great conversation with folks out there in terms of organizing. And then yesterday, I was in Jefferson County talking to folks from there, and Elk County, and some other places. Constitutional Republicans of Western Pennsylvania, thank you very much. Fantastic dinner, great conversation, uh, good close to 2 hours of speaking and answering questions from people, and probably could have stayed there all night. So fantastic. Thank you very much. Very heartening to see, in combination with what Bill Allen's got going in Philadelphia. With those groups building up to our Quakertown rally on 16 July, we got a lot of energy. It is heartening to see folks that are out there. So that's the good news part of the equation. The bad news part of the equation is are the latest developments in the Al Schmidt saga. So for those of you that have been watching videos that I've been pumping out over the last few days, you know that Al Schmidt was nominated by Governor Shapiro to be the Secretary of State, which would make him basically the chief election official in the state of Pennsylvania and put him in charge of running elections for the whole state. So Al Schmidt is best known, notorious in our circles for the 2020 election in Philadelphia. At that point, he was in charge of running the elections in Philadelphia. Al's, by the way, allegedly a Republican. So he presided over that election, and in the aftermath of that, obviously, there were an entire stack of issues presented, suggesting that there could very well have been massive fraud. And here, I think, is the really crucial factor. If you boil down what everybody said, including folks like Catherine Engelbrecht and at True the Vote, all they really ever said was, okay, listen, man, there's a whole stack of reasons to think that the results in the election coming out of Philadelphia could be grossly inaccurate, that there could have been huge amounts of electoral fraud and theft. And somebody ought to investigate this. That's the bottom line that everybody needs to take away. They said, look, True the Vote, Catherine Engelbrecht, we've got all this cell phone data suggesting that there's a bunch of guys in Philadelphia who were running around pretty much every day during the mail-in voting period, visiting multiple drop boxes, and we've got video showing people stuffing handfuls of ballots into drop boxes when in Pennsylvania it's illegal for you to do that, and somebody ought to dig into this. And Schmidt's response to all of this was simply to label it all as, you guessed it, conspiracy theories and disinformation and misinformation, and then really go on the offensive and demonize anybody who was pressuring him. They were now, of course, deplorables and to be despised, and he was a victim. And this progressed to the point where Donald Trump was criticizing Schmidt by name for his refusal to look into these allegations, and Schmidt was responding by fighting back against the president and then climbing up on the podium next to Governor Wolf, very happy to be supporting Governor Wolf against grassroots Republicans who were, again, really all they were saying was, hey, would somebody look at this? Because it smells really bad. So in any event, this is probably pretty close to the last guy on the planet that most Republicans would think should be put in charge of elections for the entire Commonwealth, particularly going into another presidential election. Shapiro nominated him. He went to the Senate. The Senate is under Republican control. It was referred to a committee headed by Chris Dush, Senator Chris Dush. Again, obviously, Chris, a Republican in charge of that committee, majority Republicans on the committee. So the capacity is there to simply vote down. I mean, there is no impediment, never was any impediment to the committee just simply saying, we're going to vote this down, send us another name. This dude's unacceptable. Instead of that, the committee voted to recommend he be confirmed, voted it out of committee. Chris Dush said laudatory things about Schmidt. Basically, I'm really looking forward to having you in charge of elections for the state. Sent it on, and it was then referred to the Rules Committee. Okay, we warned at the time in a previous video that the play here was that they were going to allow, the Senate Republicans, going to allow this nomination to sit more than 25 days, because under the the Pennsylvania Constitution, if a nomination has been sent to the legislature and not acted on in 25 days, it automatically gets confirmed. So that, in other words, Pennsylvania Senate Republicans were going to use this as a mechanism for confirming Schmidt, allowing him to become permanently placed into the position of Secretary of State, where he already was acting. But then they could say, well, we never actually voted for him on the floor. So they can get to go home to their constituents and say with a straight face, I didn't vote for the guy. But the critical thing is they didn't vote him down either. They allowed deliberately the nomination to sit for more than 25 days. This is typical Harrisburg dodge. You're supposed to be so stupid that you don't get it. They confirm him. They put this guy Schmidt in charge of elections for the entire state, but they get to claim they never formally did it. Well, that just happened, folks. What we warned you was going to happen did happen. The 25 days elapsed. Al Schmidt, now confirmed, he is now officially, permanently the Secretary of State. So the guy that brought you Philadelphia elections in 2020 is now in charge of Pennsylvania elections for 2024. And all because the Senate, under Republican control, made that happen. So just absorb that, right? This is when you're looking at when you're looking at issues with elections and talking about the Democratic Party and the agenda, that's all valid. But just like a Republican-controlled legislature gave us mail-in voting in the first place, Al Schmidt was just given to us by a Republican-controlled Senate who could have voted down the nomination anytime. Chris Dush didn't need to move it out of committee, could have voted it down and said to Shapiro, get us a better guy. They did not. So again, let's just review. Chris Dush, whose district I was just in Jefferson County, he voted for this guy. Everybody on his committee, every Republican on his committee, all the Democrats as well, of course, everybody except Doug Mastriano on that committee voted for this guy. So they said, yeah, we think this guy's a good choice. And then it was allowed to sit in Rules Committee, which is run by Joe Pittman, Senator Joe Pittman. It was allowed to sit there deliberately until the 25 days expired. So you guys have been doing great work firing up the phone lines and sending emails and letting folks in the Senate know what you think about this. You need to do it even more now. You need to step it up now. You need to call them out directly, Chris Dush and Joe Pittman specifically, and say, we know what the hell you just did. We're not stupid. You just put the guy who brought us that old Philly magic in 2020 in charge of elections going into 2024. And the whole thing stinks. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you guys soon.